Hi everybody. So today we're going to be talking about Civil War soldiers, in particular not only the weapons that they use but also the typical gear and clothing that they have with them. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the primary infantry weapon throughout the Civil War. This would be a muzzle loading rifle. This is a replica Enfield, and so this is a non-firing weapon, but you'll still get to be able to see nearly everything in the way that the weapon functions. Now, one of the first things we need to talk about is the way that they sort of march and actually perform these actions. Now, you've all seen some kind of TV or movies where they show a whole bunch of guys lined up and they all shoot in the same direction. And through the Revolutionary period, through most of the 1700s, into the 1800s, and into the 1860s, they all still fought the same battles that way. And if that seemed really stupidly weird that you would just stand there and shoot at a line of guys and they shoot back at you, there was a real reason for it. And the reason for that was the way that weapons were made in the 16 and 1700s. Now, most of the guys in the Revolutionary period are using what we call smoothbore weapons, meaning the actual barrel is simply a smooth cylindrical tube. There's nothing inside of it. So when you take a round lead ball, which looks basically like this, now this lead ball is not a perfect sphere. It's probably hard for you to see right there, but there are little bitty dimples, indentions, there are raised areas, so it's not like a ball bearing. So that means whenever you put this ball down the barrel, there are little bits of space on either side of it. It's not fitting perfectly flush. So whenever you actually set off the weapon, these older style in the Revolutionary period were flintlock. So to use a little piece of flint striking what's called a frizzen to make a spark that explodes the gunpowder and sends the ball down the barrel. Just expansion of gases. Well, when those gases expand, they're pushing the ball down the barrel, but little bits of the gas are escaping around it, meaning it's not a full pressurized vessel. As the ball continues down the barrel, because it has little bits of space, it bounces. And we're talking about microns, very, very minute amounts of space that it's bouncing along the barrel. So when it exits the barrel, whatever the last part that it touched, whether that's the right side of the barrel or left or top or bottom, that's kind of the direction it's going to fly. So that means it is inaccurate. So if you were firing a smoothbore weapon at somebody, you maybe could hit them at 50 yards, and that's maybe. Almost no one could accurately hit anything past 150 yards or so, at least deliberately trying to do that. But what changes in the 1850s is the advent of what is called the Minié ball, invented by a French designer, Claude Minié, but for Americans it was just mini. And the difference is the ball itself is a conical shape. It has three little striations cut into it, and it also has a hollow base. To give you an idea of what one of those looks like, looks kind of like this. You can see the conical shape, you see the three little striations, and you see the hollow base. So the difference is, when you fire this one, that hollow base, because it's lead, expands, and so it hugs the entire part of the barrel, so there's no gaps around it, so there's no gas escaping around the bullet. They also cut a spiral groove inside the barrel, so it's kind of represented here, but this will be a complete spiral all the way inside the barrel. This is called rifling. This is where we get the term of a rifle. So what happens is when that bullet starts traveling down the barrel, those little grooves cut into the bullet, hitting those little grooves cut into the barrel, make it start to spin. And so as it spins, it's kind of the difference between taking a baseball and trying to throw it like that versus throwing a spiral football. It means you get more accuracy, more kinetic energy, and distance. So you increase the distance between 50 yards that someone may be able to fire to up to 800 yards. So the reason that they usually fought standing in these rows was the fact that previously, if you were using a smoothbore weapon, if you know that you cannot accurately hit something at 50 yards, they thought the best means that we can do is just have all of us stand in a row and all shoot at the same time. So if we put enough lead down range, it doesn't really matter that you technically miss your target because you could hit somebody else. But they're using the same tactics for when they switch to weapons like this. And so standing only 100 yards away from each other, they're still using far more accurate weapons but the tactics should have changed. Now, when one of these bullets actually hits you, this is soft lead. So that same mini ball that I showed you, that looks like this, after it has actually hit your body, it looks like this. This is a chunk of lead that was actually taken from a mini ball fired at Missionary Ridge in 1864. So this causes massive damage. Now, the way that we will load one of these is performed in a 9 count. Now here I'm only wearing the basic things that you need to actually fire one of these. You have a cap pouch, which holds a little thing called a percussion cap. Now the percussion cap, which I'm hoping you'll be able to see, is that little guy right there. Little tiny thing with a little hollow base in it. It's a fulminated mercury cap. So if something hard hits it, it'll make a little spark. So you have a little pouch completely full of those. And you also have in your cartridge box a whole bunch of paper tubes. And inside of that paper tube, at the base of it, is one of the bullets, the mini ball, with gunpowder, and a little bit of paper that's simply folded over and tucked in, so it's not sealed in any way. So the way that you would load one of these is when you go into your cartridge box, and you notice that it's behind my right hip. This was deliberately done, because if this was fully loaded, this might be 60 rounds full of gunpowder. You want it as far away from other bullets hitting as possible, because if this was up here in front and something were to hit and spark this would probably blow you in half because of how much gunpowder is in it. So when you go to load, you'll pull out one of those cartridges and you bite off the end of that piece of paper. To be in the infantry, you had to have 4 teeth, 2 on top, 2 on bottom, that actually met each other, so you could physically bite that piece of paper and spit it out. You would pour the powder into the barrel and push the bullet down with your thumb. So the bullet is in there correctly. You then pull out the ramrod. This end is what's going into the barrel. So you pull it all the way out and invert it and push the bullet all the way down into the breech. The bullet's going to be down here with the powder. You pull the ramrod out, return it using your pinky, because at this point this is a fully loaded weapon. You do not want the bullet in your hand somewhere close to this. So you put it down with your pinky. You then pull this up to half cock. There's 1 notch there. You go into the cap pouch and pull out one of those percussion caps and put it on the nipple, a little piece right there, and there's a little tiny hole that goes all the way down into the breech. You then go to full cock, take aim, and fire. So when you fire, when this hammer hits that little piece of fulminated mercury in that percussion cap, a little spark is sent into the breech, ignites the gunpowder, the expansion of the gas pushes the bullet out. This is generally how weapons were fired for well over 100 years. Now that's a long process of having to reach into here, pull this out, bite it, pull that out, pour the powder, put the bullet in, pull the ramrod out, ram this down, pull that back out, invert it, pull it up here, reach in here, get a percussion cap, put that on, fire, and repeat it. A good infantry soldier could get off about 3 aimed shots in a minute, which is not very fast. That seems like a decent fast kind of time, but if you think about in the course of a single minute, 3 shots is not fast at all. So throughout the Civil War, they started figuring out better ways of creating newer weapons. It's one of the first times we actually have actual cartridges, so that the entire gunpowder, the bullet, and the primer were all encased in the same thing. So we started having more rifles that'll fire things like that. One of the early ones was the Henry rifle that was a lever action, which you've probably seen examples of. We also have one of those called a Spencer, and also a Sharps carbine. It would all have multiple bullets loaded in it. So instead of having to reload this full measure, you could simply load one kind of thing, basically cock the hammer back and fire. This is almost exclusively used by the Union infantry. Confederate soldiers throughout the war, sometimes even still, were relying on these old mini balls, but also sometimes they still had the original smoothbore weapons. Meaning the Confederates really did not have much technology to invent new things or be able to create them. So the Union Army, as the war progressed, were better and better able to defeat Confederate enemies.